I think there are so many people wonder how to eradicate poverty at the rural area in developing countries. Does it matter? No, it does not matter. It's simple. I will tell them just adopt Saemaul Undong to the villages where it needed. It could be an effective way to make a rich village. Children who live in those villages will grow well with lots of nutritious food and nice clothing, etc. Okay, let's check it out. What is the Saemaul Undong and what is the basic spirit? Saemaul is a combined word of Se and Maul. Se in Korean means new or refreshed, and Maul means a village, which is basic unit of community. Being new involves emerging from the old customs and breaking up from the convention. It is inevitable accompanied with changes and reformations. A village also could be expanded to your workplace, living space, and local community, not only limited to your own hamlet. In other words, Saemaul means a movement of making your local community better ways, and also a village rehabilitated by efforts of its own residents. For this purpose, we need self-reflection on ourselves. We should get the answer about what we must conserve and what we must change. That answer, we get it, the hope for ourselves, and the hope is to seek to be realized naturally. Here it needs Undong, namely people's movement in Korean. Who shall do it? It should be done by the community as a whole. Who shall get benefits from it? Its fruits should be enjoyed by the community as a whole. That is the basic concept of Saemaul Undong. Basically, Saemaul Undong is a movement for well-being. It's a movement to escape from poverty. Let's eat well. Let's get dressed well. Let's live in safe and comfortable houses. Let our children educated well. Get us well treated when we are ill, and get us living a civilized life, as well as large cities. Not only living well for me, but living well for my village and for my country. Not depending on someone else for help, but doing it by our hand in right ways. It cannot be done by a single man. Most of residents in rural villages have little in their possession. We must stand together and help each other to move forward. Our village is a community of living and working, having common purpose of its dwellers' well-being. It is also fight against old and deep pessimistic views. The thought of poverty is our fate, or we cannot do it. It's a movement of getting over our pessimism, a movement of helping and caring for others rather than myself, a movement of thinking and acting as the master of my life, a movement of finding values and achievement from progress of my country. It is the movement of moral reformation. After all, Saemaul Undong is the movement of well-being, the movement of fighting our own way, and the movement of moral reformation. We can do it. We will do it It is the basic of Saemaul Undong. How can we do it when nobody can help us and every one of us is in desperate? Let's unite it and do it with diligence, self-help, and cooperation. The three guiding spirits of Saemaul Undong. Among Western proverbs, there is a saying related to diligence that goes, "The early bird catches the worm." In order to overcome the current problem of poverty, diligence is one of the most useful and practical spirits. Self-help is the spirit of doing my work by myself, realizing that my fate and my future depends on myself, and doing the best in my efforts. As an individual, it demonstrates the spirit of ownership, of doing everything independently, knowing that you are the master of your own fate. As a country, this is a virtue that helps establish a national identity, that strengthens the independence of the people. Cooperation is the spirit of believing in the power of unity. When we are united as a whole, we can do much more than the simple add up of each one's. It is the spirit that cares for others first and encourages each other, and that shares with and help each other and work and get over together hardness. When we are diligent, we don't need to depend on others. When we are self-help, even the heaven would help us. When we are cooperate, there is nothing stopping us. Diligence, self-help, and cooperation is the spirit of invincible which made a myth of success in poor Korea.
Saemaul Undong in Korea started in 1970 by the late President Park Chung-hee. Korea had suffered severe eras from the early 20th century through the mid of it. It had undergone tyrannical ruling by foreign imperialists and got divided into two countries by force after that. There was a fierce war and political disruption, and chaos followed it. From 1960s, Korea began national program for industrialization, but had not much resource for that, and there were not enough jobs for people. In rural area, it was worse in the worst. Farming houses are 70% of the national population, but most of them can't afford meal of a day. Young children had to give hands for farming instead of going to school. But still, they did not have enough to eat. The gap between urban and rural area was kept broadening. So many people swarmed in cities, and it made the urban area very unstable. Korea couldn't expect any progress of the nation. But the national resource was not abundant, and the government couldn't take the responsibility of supporting the rural communities. The only possible breakthrough was the awakening and participation of people. But farmers were tired and exhausted of poverty and alienation and hardly had any will of reformation. Actually, they didn't have any hope that their life could be better. Thus, the government proposed Saemaul Undong for rural community to inspire the people for their sleeping energy and lead them into the progress of rural communities. The most important thing in Saemaul Undong is the will and efforts of the community to make our life better and higher. Support from government could be big help, but it can't be like that always. It could be that the government has no ability and intent to help, that the government have intent to help but no ability to do, or that the government itself be in desperate condition. Even if the government would help, it is ourselves who have the best knowledge of our standing and goals, and thus too much intervention from government could disturb or misguide the progress of the community. Even if there was no help from outside, we can open up our ways by sharing resources and helping each other. And by that way, you can get the government concern for your movement, or even get helping hands from international organizations and foreign aid. Heaven helps to help themselves. In Korea, there were community leaders who sought sincerely and acted first, and people who struggled and worked with those leaders. They were real heroes who made Saemaul Undong succeed in accomplishing the economic growth. Saemaul Undong is not for rural communities solely, but rural community is the best place to start it and make its impact spread well. Rural area is always lower to cities in income, living conditions, welfare, and healthcare. But it shows strong solidarity in community and high correlation of work and labor. Rural community shares many things among its members in daily life, which cannot be found in cities. In other words, it has high demand for changes and progress and very good condition for cooperation. Also, rural communities and farming industry are fundamentals of a whole nation. The progress of rural area is directly related to the progress of national industry, and human and spiritual resources spread in rural communities give huge impact on urban communities. In Korea, Saemaul Undong first started in rural communities, but soon spread into cities and turned into a national movement and the symbol of modernization and industrialization. In the end, Saemaul Undong starts from rural area but do not remain as a movement of rural community only. It is a movement for everybody, whether you are in rural village or large city, whether you are a farmer or a factory worker, whether young or old. You do your best in your place to develop your community, your workplace, and your country better and stronger. It is Saemaul Undong. Have you ever seen Korea in its 1950s and 1960s in pictures or with your own eyes, and Korea in its 1980s or after? Then you would realize there is really surprising changes between those two eras. Saemaul Undong got its fame of today from the rapid growth of Korea's economy, which turned the poor agricultural country into a high developed industrial country within 2 decades. When Saemaul Undong first started in 1970s, Korea was much poorer and it could hardly be anything more than a movement to escape from starving. But by the end of 1970s, people were saying the words of miracle in Han River, and from 1980s, Korea was called as one of the 4 dragons in Asia. Of course, it is not like that Saemaul Undong made all of the miracles, but you can say that it did one of the most essential parts in the whole process. It could be said that economic growth of Korea was a process of creating wealth from nothingness. There was no role model we could study and follow after. Material resources were hardly available. The only one thing we could depend on was the power of people. Saemaul Undong was the national agenda that united the power of people under the flag of economic development. The real fame of Saemaul Undong is not in the outcome of economic growth. It was earned from the struggles and spirits of many nameless who challenged the fate of poverty, shouting the face of "we can do it, we will do it," and supported the era of high growth all the way, just with their bare hands and fists. During the 3 decades of Saemaul Undong, there were many marvelous success, but also trial errors as many. You should be very careful that such a failure would not happen in the early stage of induction, especially if the government gets involved in the movement. In Korea, Saemaul Undong got it involved very deeply with government organization, from the president himself to the lower level civil servant. It offered a strong driving force for the movement in the early stage, but later became the source of negative influences. Government organization tended to prefer strictness of procedure and order from its nature. Thus, they first uniform standardized working plan and emphasized showing result rather than long-term progress. Many plans were proceeded only for showing off and frequently turned into destroying environment without consideration or devaluing, renouncing traditional cultures in the community under the pretense of modernization. But you can overcome and minimize negative impacts of such a kind if you know and stick to the principle of self-help, relying on power and resources of community. Common experience of getting over trial and errors together with turn into a traditional and role as sort of the community. Saemaul Undong was started based in rural areas as a movement that could show off visible changes in short period. Increasing food production in rural areas through the Saemaul Undong will help to reduce poverty and carbon dioxide. As you know, carbon dioxide is the key greenhouse gas that drives global climate crisis. In other words, Saemaul Undong could be the solution to the life crisis that we are facing. From the next video clip, we will take a look at step 5 to practice Saemaul Undong.